Why did I agree to watch you? You're just like your father. Dirty and gross. I can never understand why my stupid sister would marry a black man, and it brings the family shame for her to have a kid as dark as you. Listen, just do the chores that I tell you to do, and we won't have any problems. Do you understand? I nodded my head, but I really didn't understand what he was saying. I did, however, understand by his tone, though, that if I disobeyed him, that I would be punished for doing so. Over the next few weeks, he showed me the various chores that he expected me to do, and while I was very young, I tried my best to do them just as he had shown me. My name is Mateo, and I had a very unusual childhood. Sadly, I never actually met my mother as she passed away during childbirth. More than a few people told me that I look a lot like her, and I take it as a compliment, as she was a very beautiful woman. My father took her death especially hard and worried that he wouldn't be able to afford to raise me, as my mother had been the breadwinner and didn't have any life insurance. When I was 8, he did manage to find a job overseas working on an oil rig. It was dangerous work, but it paid really well. Since he was gone for most of the year, he had arranged for me to live with my Uncle Rob. Rob was my mother's younger brother, and from what I found out later in life, it had taken a lot of convincing for him to agree to take care of me. He was divorced and lived in a small house and was rather mean. The day after my father left, my uncle took a good look at me, and I instantly knew that I was in trouble. Why did I agree to watch you? You're just like your father. Dirty and gross. I can never understand why my stupid sister would marry a black man, and it brings the family shame for her to have a kid as dark as you. Listen, just do the chores that I tell you to do, and we won't have any problems. Do you understand? I nodded my head, but I really didn't understand what he was saying. I did, however, understand by his tone, though, that if I disobeyed him, that I would be punished for doing so. Over the next few weeks, he showed me the various chores that he expected me to do, and while I was very young, I tried my best to do them just as he had shown me, but I still failed quite often. Each time I did, he would use his belt and hit me with it. Eventually, I learned to do things like the laundry and dishes well enough that I was no longer punished, but I knew that any slip-up at all, and I would face the belt again. Aside from that, I also had to be on the lookout for when my uncle would drink, as he would get violent. It didn't matter whether I did my chores or not. He would just take one look at me and bring out the belt. The only times that I had any sort of relief was when my father and my aunt would visit. While they were divorced, my aunt would visit Rob to check in on me. I didn't understand why she felt it was her duty to check on me, but it was nice that while she was there, that I could feel safe if only for a few hours. The only other times that I felt safe were the rare times that my father would come for a visit. My uncle would put on a good show and make it look good. He would threaten me and promise that if I said anything bad about him, that he would make things even worse for me. He knew that my father had no other choice but to leave me with him, which he was quick to remind me of after my father left usually. Just remember that without me, that you'll be out on the street. People like you can't get real jobs and have to resort to working outside the country like your dad is doing. Honestly, the country would be way better off if all you dark-skinned people were kicked out of the country. So, yeah, without me, that might very well happen to you. As I grew older, I found out that my father sent large amounts of money to my uncle in exchange for watching over me, although I knew that most of that money went towards buying liquor and prostitutes. My uncle had many vices, but my father didn't know about them. Then one day shortly after I turned 16, we received word that my father had been injured on the job, and within a couple days he had passed away. With no more money being sent from my father to my uncle, he decided to kick me out. He didn't care that I wasn't an adult. His only concern was that with no more money coming in, that I was just a hindrance to him, that I would eat up his already limited funds. With nowhere to go, I contacted his ex-wife Lucinda and begged her to let me stay with her until I could find a way to get a place of my own. I knew that it was a long shot, but I really had other options. Surprisingly, Lucinda took me in, and while I expected her to only let me stay a few nights, she instead promised me that I could stay for as long as I wanted. But you don't even know me, and we aren't family, so why are you helping me?
There were many reasons why I divorced your uncle, but one of them was the fact that I couldn't have children, and well, Rob wasn't the kind of person to adopt. It might sound odd, but you were always the child that I always wanted to have, but never did.
I was hesitant to trust her as my time with my uncle had left me feeling jaded and reluctant to trust anyone really. But the more time that we spent together, the more I began to realize that she was on the level. She was just desperate for family and connection, and if I was being honest, so was I. Moving in with her was one of the best decisions that I had ever made. When I had lived with my uncle, he barely fed me more than the minimum that was required to keep me alive. And as such, I was extremely thin and underweight. But after I moved in with Lucinda, she made sure that I never went hungry ever again. She fed me so well that I went from being underweight to a bit overweight, if I'm being honest. On top of that, she even helped me to find a scholarship that would pay for college once I came of age. It was rather nice, actually, to be able to go to college, especially since I had never even dreamed that it would be possible. The day that I graduated was one of the happiest days of my life, and my aunt cried tears of joy.
Oh, Mateo. Your father and mother would be so proud of you. You've done so well for yourself.
Thank you, Aunt Lucinda. I couldn't have done this without you. I had taken material engineering and had graduated at the top of my class, which guaranteed me a job at a wonderful company. The pay was more than I could have expected, and soon after, I bought myself a house and started to really enjoy my new life. Things were going really well for me, until one day I was paid a visit by my uncle. Foolishly, I let him into my house and then let him tell me all about his woes. As it turned out, he was on the verge of bankruptcy as his drinking habit had only gotten worse, and he had recently had a liver transplant. He had no insurance to cover the cost of the transplant and had to take out a massive loan to pay for it. Without a solid income, though, he was quickly falling behind on his payments and hadn't reduced his drinking at all. To be honest, he didn't really look that healthy when he came to visit me.
Hey, listen, I know it's been a while, but you owe me for taking care of you all those years ago. I heard that you managed to convince that idiot Lucinda to give you money, and that you've got yourself a good-paying job.
Wait a minute. Do you honestly expect me to give you money for all the nonsense that you put me through? You used to beat me just because you had a few drinks in your system.
Oh, grow up. That's all in the past. Besides, unlike Lucinda, I actually am family.
Yes, you are related to me by blood, but that doesn't actually make us family. Unlike you, Lucinda has proven that she is worthy of the title of being called family. She is everything that you can never be. Kind, loving, patient, and someone that I can count on. You made it abundantly clear what you thought of me and my father. You hated us because of our skin color. Are you drunk now? Because you must be if you think that I'll give you a single penny.
If you don't help me, I'll end up losing my house to pay back the loan, and on top of that, I may have to get the surgery again.
That really isn't my problem. The only person to blame for your liver being destroyed is you. You've ruined your own body, and now you have to deal with the consequences of your choices. I could see his face getting redder and redder as we talked, and he quickly reached for his belt. I couldn't believe that he thought that I would let him abuse me with it like he used to when I was a child, especially since he was now quite frail, and I had grown up to be a lot stronger than him. Before he could get his belt fully off, I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and lifted him a few inches into the air, before then throwing him to the ground. Standing there above him, he looked so weak and fragile, and a part of me wanted to have pity on him. But then I remembered all the pain and torment that he had delivered onto me, and I just shouted at him to get out of my home and to never speak to me again. 2 months later, a police officer came to my door and informed me that they had found my uncle dead. Apparently, he had lost his house shortly after we had spoken, and he had been forced to live on the street. With what little money he had left, he had bought a lot of alcohol and had drunk himself unconscious every night, which caused his liver disease to return, which led to his death. It was then that I did feel sympathy for him. He was a horrible person, but he was family, and so I did pay for him to have a proper funeral. Aside from myself and Aunt Lucinda, the only other person that attended it, though, was a priest, and he was paid to be there. My uncle had no friends, and I was the last of his family members alive. Thinking back, I tried my best to learn some valuable life lessons from both my father and uncle. From my father, I learned that no matter how good a job is, that no job is worth sacrificing time with those that you love. Time with family is far more important. And from my uncle, I learned the lesson to love my fellow man. that having your heart filled with hatred is a cancer that steals happiness and leaves you bitter and alone. Hard lessons learned, but good ones to have. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
The first thing I did was kick my stepmom and stepbrothers out of the house. They begged me to let them live there for a few months until they found a place to live. But I wanted them out immediately and moved all their stuff to a local motel for 2 months. Hey, I'm Jennifer. I love cooking. It's like my own magic potion of flavors and happiness. My dad, who's a cool truck driver, introduced me to this awesome world of cooking. We'd spend lots of time in the kitchen, making delicious stuff and having a blast. I never got to know my mom because she died of cancer when I was young. It was just me and my dad. But my dad was probably lonely. He was very friendly with everyone and loved to turn strangers into friends. So, my dad, being the amazing guy he is, decided to get remarried. He met Karen, a waitress at a truck stop, and they hit it off. After 2 months of dating, calling and texting each other, my dad decided to get married and make things better for both of us. I thought it would be super cool to have a new family. But turns out, Karen isn't a fan of my cooking adventures. Our kitchen, once filled with laughter, turned kinda stressful. Hey Karen, I thought I'd give cooking a try tonight. How about helping out?
Cooking? Oh, honey, that's cute. But don't you think it's best if I handle this? You might mess things up.
Oh, no worries, Karen. I found this great recipe, and I thought it would be a nice surprise for everyone. I'll just follow the instructions.
Surprise? We don't need surprises. Stick to what you're good at, dear. Leave the cooking to someone who knows what they're doing.
I want to help, Karen. I've been practicing, and I'm sure I can do it. Let me at least try.
Try? I'm not sure this is the time for experimenting, Jennifer. Just step aside and let me handle it. We wouldn't want a disaster, would we?
I can do it, Karen. I don't need you to take over everything. I want to be part of this family, too.
Family? Sweetie, you'll never fit in completely. Just accept that and spare us all the trouble.
After that conversation, I never had any quality time in the kitchen. I wanted to be a chef when I finished high school, but my stepmom discouraged me from applying to a cooking school. She told me that I couldn't even make scrambled eggs. A few years after the marriage, my stepmom said her 2 sons from a previous marriage were going to live with us. Her sons, Doug and Jim, were teenagers and liked to talk loudly and play loud music. They were always disrespectful to me and never turned down the music when I asked them to. I was quietly studying to be a teacher and needed to pass all the tests. Finally, my stepmom heard about all my conflicts with my stepbrothers and told me to move out. I told her I didn't have a place to go, and she said it wasn't her problem. I took a student loan and moved out the following month and rented a small apartment close to the campus. My dad was mostly on the road and thought everything was going well at home, but he didn't know the extent of my problems. This went on for a few years, and when it was time for me to graduate, I invited my dad, my stepmom, and stepbrothers to attend the graduation ceremony. Afterwards, we had a celebratory dinner at a local restaurant, and when my dad was not looking, presented me with the $400 dinner tab. She said since I would be making the big bucks, then I should be paying. Since I didn't want to cause a scene, I paid the bill. My stepbrothers just laughed. I found work as an elementary school teacher and met a fellow teacher, Tom, who shared the same interest with me in cooking and music. We eventually talked about marriage, and I introduced Tom to my stepmom, who I thought would be happy for me. Karen, this is Tom, my fiancé.
Oh dear, another one of your experiments. Tom, brace yourself. Jennifer's cooking is a disaster waiting to happen.
Actually, Tom loves my cooking. We enjoy making meals together.
It's true, Karen. Jennifer is an amazing cook. We've had some delicious adventures in the kitchen.
Well, I doubt that. A good cook doesn't just happen. Maybe you should let someone more experienced handle the kitchen. Save yourselves from disappointment.
Karen, I appreciate your concern, but we've got our own recipe for happiness, and it doesn't involve negativity.
Happiness won't fill stomachs, Jennifer. You might want to think practically for once.
After that meeting, I decided never to invite my stepmom to any events. We decided to have a quickie wedding in Vegas. Finally, when I did see my dad, I told him about the conflicts I had with my stepmom. He looked pale, and I asked him what was wrong. Because he was a heavy smoker, he admitted to me that he had cancer and was told he had a few months to live. My stepmom overheard this, and she asked him out loud to buy a life insurance policy, which he did the next day. My dad told me to get along with everyone, and it wasn't too long when he got sick and passed away. The funeral was attended by 500 people, and she ensured that it was an extravagant one, with lots of food for the attendees. I was surprised when she sent me the bill for $10,000, which was to cover all the funeral-related expenses. I wanted to take home a few mementos of my dad, but she would only allow me 1 hour to take a few items. Most of the other items were taken away by other relatives. I managed to pick up a few ties and his favorite mug he used for his trucking job, but even that turned into a conflict. I'd really like to keep Dad's favorite mug as a memento. It means a lot to me.
Well, Jennifer, I'm thinking of keeping it. Your dad gave it to me, you know.
He did, but he always said it was his favorite mug.
He might have said that, but it was a gift to me. I think I'll keep it.
But I really wanted something to remember Dad by. Please, let me have the mug.
It's not like you appreciated him when he was alive. Why would you care about a silly mug now?
It's not about that. I just want something to remember him by.
Well, you can find something else. This mug is staying with me.
Leaving my stepmom with the mug, I was mad. I didn't want to see her again. Later, they read Dad's will, and it was a big surprise. I thought Dad didn't have much, but turns out he left everything to me. The house, a lot of money, and some other stuff. It was way more than just a mug. My stepmom fainted when the lawyer said it, and her sons had to help her. What made the whole day memorable was that my dad had a letter read out in which he accused his new wife of infidelity. As part of his last will, he asked his lawyer to read the letter.
Dear Karen, I suppose now you may be shocked and unhappy that I'm leaving you with nothing. This is because, over the last few years, you have made my life difficult and unpleasant. You gave me massive credit card bills for jewelry and other expenses when I was on the road. When I started coughing and getting sicker, you told me to keep on working and to forget about seeing the doc. Finally, when I could no longer stand, someone from work took me to the hospital where the doctor told me I had end-of-life cancer. If you had encouraged me to see the doctor sooner, things could have been different. Now, I am rewriting my last will to leave you out of everything. What was worse was that I found out that you were having affairs with different men. One day, I came home from work early, and you accidentally left your computer open. I saw your profile on Tinder and that you were hooking up with lots of men. I was disgusted. Oh, and by the way, I changed the beneficiary of my $100,000 insurance to my only daughter. Sincerely, your happy husband, Eric.
After the letter was read, my stepmom turned red and she didn't say anything. My 2 stepbrothers were both shocked beyond belief. With the inheritance, I could start a new chapter in my life. The first thing I did was kick my stepmom and stepbrothers out of the house. They begged me to let them live there for a few months until they found a place to live. But I wanted them out immediately and moved all their stuff to a local motel for 2 months. My stepmom asked me to find them permanent housing, but I eventually blocked all her text messaging and calls. I did the same to my stepbrothers and especially took great pleasure in removing their music tapes and other equipment from my house. As for myself, I used some of the money to have a bigger wedding and invited close friends and some distant relatives. I also invited my dad, too, and brought along a large picture of my dad to my church ceremony and my wedding reception. It was a wedding to remember. I don't communicate with my stepmom and stepbrothers anymore, but I hear my stepmom later married an abusive man who often beats her. They have mailed me a few letters that they apologized for their treatment of me. I chose to wipe them away from my memory and my life. What would you do? Sorry, Kevin, someone else is calling. I'll call back in a minute. Hello? Who is this? What are you talking about?
How could you do this, you slimy bitch?
You and your son are horrible people.
You were supposed to give me grandbabies and take care of my boy. Now he's gotten one of his whores pregnant, but because of that horrible video that's circulating, she's going to force him to pay child support. Another one of them slashed his tires, but before she did that, she beat my son and even broke his nose.
My name is Natalie, and my soon-to-be husband, Albert, has been a strong-minded man since I met him. We had met through a dating app, and our first few dates went so well that we quickly moved in with each other. About a year after we moved into the same apartment, Albert proposed to me. I hadn't even met his parents yet, but I loved Albert, so I accepted the proposal. Oh, Albert! Of course I'll marry you. We started making plans for the wedding right away, but Albert wasn't the most helpful when planning the wedding because he was busy with his new promotion at work. I was thankful that my brother Kevin was always available to help. Kevin is my older brother, and ever since I can remember, he supported me. Our parents got divorced when we were younger, and even though we were raised by different parents, Kevin always made sure to keep in touch. So instead of my father walking me down the aisle for my wedding, I chose Kevin, and he soothed my nervousness. Getting married was a big step. At first, I'd refused to leave my changing room even though the dress fit me perfectly.
It will be fine, Natalie. You love the guy. This is your big day, and after the stuffy ceremony, you'll have a great party at the reception.
You're right. It's just wedding jitters. I'm a bit worried about meeting his parents.
It's a bit odd you haven't met them yet, but maybe they're quiet people. Our parents are likely to start some arguments tonight, so that's what I'm worried about. But don't worry, I'll handle them.
Kevin was able to reassure me. Things would be okay, as long as I didn't do something silly like run out on the wedding. Kevin led me out of my changing area to the large closed doors for the ceremony, and once he pushed them open, the music started and people turned to stare. After the tense walk up the aisle, Kevin let me stand in front of Albert. Albert was handsome in his suit, but it was strange that there was a woman standing next to him. She must be his mother because their faces looked very similar. All I knew about her was that her name was Sylvia. Albert, is that your mom?
She insisted that she accompany me to the altar, which is ridiculous. I'm not a girl.
It wasn't the first time that Albert had said something like that, but this time he didn't have the opportunity to apologize or make it seem less misogynistic. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach, but then the officiate properly began the ceremony. Albert and I had both decided on writing our own vows, and I read mine first. My vows were simple, that I loved him and would always be faithful. When it was his turn to read his vows, Albert's mother handed him a piece of paper that he read from.
As my lovely wife, I expect you to be faithful to me and support me in anything I choose to pursue. I expect you to cook and clean. I also expect you to care for my mother as if she were your own, and to listen to her like a daughter should. In return, I will love you and provide a home for our family.
Once again, there was an uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, even if nothing was necessarily wrong. His vows seemed more self-centered than I expected of him. He seemed satisfied with himself, but when I opened my mouth to speak, the officiate continued.
And does anyone in the crowd have any reason these two should not be wed?
Stop. I can't do this.
Darling, what's wrong? You were fine just a moment ago. Don't be getting cold feet now.
This whole thing just felt off to me, and maybe I was overreacting, but we hadn't talked about his mother being with us at the altar like this. That small change in our plans set off alarm bells in my mind.
You can't run from this girl. I own you. That's what you've agreed to.
Own me? What?
The vows you agreed to be my perfect daughter, and now I own you.
Stop the wedding. I'm not getting married. Not today.
Darling, my mother is overreacting. Once we're married, she won't have so much nervous energy.
I am not overreacting, young man. Marry this girl now so you can get on with your life and find some other nice young ladies to date.
I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Had this been some sort of setup this entire time? Wait, did you just want to marry me to be some sort of live-in servant? Albert hadn't ever treated me poorly, but he did spend a lot of extra time at work, and he supported me financially, so I did all the work in the house. Was I just a maid to him? Was he having affairs when he said he was working late?
Of course. I mean, having a warm body in bed with me at night is nice too, but I've never been a one-woman kind of guy, darling. I love you, but not much more than any other woman I've slept with. But none of them are willing to clean the house or have kids like you, and a man needs those things.
I couldn't stand it anymore. This wasn't the Albert I knew. Sometimes he said horrible things about women like this, and treated them like objects, but normally he seemed slightly ashamed of those views. Now he was clinging to that nasty mindset, and I didn't know him anymore. I backed away from the altar, but then Albert just laughed.
Don't you remember? We eloped months ago and waited so we could have the ceremony with both your parents and their new spouses. We're already married. All this celebration is just for show.
Albert was right. We had technically eloped and gotten our marriage legally recognized months ago. It just hadn't felt real to me yet since we hadn't had the ceremony. I couldn't protest the marriage, even if I left the ceremony that we'd spent so much money on. The officiate looked like he very much wanted to leave.
Smart move, my boy. Lock down the girl early so she can't get away.
You can't own anybody, and if Natalie wants to leave, she should. You'll be hearing from my lawyer because this wedding just turned into a divorce.
What a waste of money. The ceremony will continue.
Kevin walked right up to Sylvia and Albert, and for a moment I was worried that Kevin would hurt them.
Not a chance. Our parents may have made our lives hard, but this is the least they could have done for Natalie. Our family paid for this wedding, so your family can leave. I never want to see your faces again.
Things were tense after that, even though Albert's family did leave. My family did make sure that the reception hall and the catered food didn't go to waste, but I didn't feel well enough to have fun. Instead, I took Kevin's keys and sat by myself in his car since he'd driven me here. After the party, Kevin let me stay at his apartment for the night before we talked about everything in the morning over coffee.
He was way out of line. I'll get in contact with my lawyer and we'll find you the best divorce attorney. Albert basically fully admitted to cheating on you and planning to do it in the future in front of dozens of witnesses. You'll get your divorce and he'll probably have to pay you too.
I took Kevin's advice and his help. He had plenty of connections to lawyers since he'd gone to law school. Even though Kevin dropped out, because he realized he'd rather run his own business instead, he kept in touch with plenty of his schoolmates. The lawyer he put me in touch with was good at her job. Together, with the help of some of my younger cousins who had filmed the events at the wedding, we pushed through a divorce with Albert. All Albert had to do was sign the papers and pay me.
I won't sign these. You married me. It's not my fault you have bad judgment.
Then go marry one of your whores that you were seeing behind my back.
Maybe I will. I can find someone better than you anyway.
The argument continued, but he eventually gave up and signed the documents. Soon, the divorce was finalized, and a good portion of Albert's savings were transferred into my bank account. The video of Albert and Sylvia's misogynistic comments was posted online. I'm not sure if it was Kevin's doing, or if one of my cousins thought it might be funny. The video got a lot of engagement, and all of Albert's affairs eventually found out exactly what he'd done. With the money I got in the divorce, I was able to get a small house. I decided that after this whole mess, I wanted to be single for a while and get a few pets. What I didn't expect was a phone call from an unknown number, interrupting my call with Kevin. Sorry, Kevin, someone else is calling. I'll call back in a minute. Hello? Who is this? What are you talking about?
How could you do this, you slimy bitch?
You and your son are horrible people.
You were supposed to give me grandbabies and take care of my boy. Now he's gotten one of his whores pregnant, but because of that horrible video that's circulating, she's going to force him to pay child support. Another one of them slashed his tires, but before she did that, she beat my son and even broke his nose. She is a boxer and was furious after hearing my boy is married. And then, after all that, one of them is a secretary at his company, and she accused him of sexual harassment and forcing her, so he got fired from his job. And there's impending criminal charges. And now there's no one to take care of me in my old age. You're a monster.
He deserve it.
What did you say?
Nothing. I laughed and hung up on her before she could finish her rant. Nothing she yelled at me made me feel bad. Her and Albert had done that to themselves. I wasn't going to let anyone try and own me ever again. Luckily for me, I met someone at the gym I trained, and we are engaged now. He is a loving partner and doesn't have a toxic mother. Thanks for watching. The impending criminal charges against Albert eventually did go to court, and I followed all the updates. He did have to pay child support to the woman he'd gotten pregnant, and he got sentenced to a year in prison with a big fine for harassment. As for Sylvia, she was left alone like the miserable old woman she was. With no one to take care of her, she had to make sure she could pay all of her bills herself since Albert couldn't anymore. She'd taken multiple part-time jobs to try and pay her bills, and in her free time, she yelled in public spaces about how she didn't deserve to be alone. There were even videos of her on the news of her nonsense rants. It was honestly embarrassing, because it really was her fault. But no one believed her anyway, and the news station had labeled her as the local crazy lady in all of their footage. Thanks for watching. My name is Clara. I work as the manager at a popular hotel, and I'm 26 years old. I've been an employee at the hotel for close to 4 years, and those years have been some of the best years of my life. I met my husband, Kenneth, 2 years ago. The company he worked as a director at wanted to partner with our hotel. As a result, Kenneth and I began to work with one another quite a bit, and we became good friends. Our friendship lasted for 6 months before we confessed our feelings to each other. Things were going smoothly until he introduced me to his parents.
She works at a hotel? How could you think to introduce a lady like her to us?
His father wasn't having it. According to him, working at a hotel as a woman wasn't acceptable.
What's the difference of a girl that works in a hotel and a prostitute? How did you get in? Did you sell your body to get the job? Or did one of your boyfriends create the connection for you? Father, you're being disrespectful to her. Please, stop it.
Did he stop? No. He made it clear to us that he wasn't in support of our relationship and told me to my face that he despised me.
I won't support my son marrying a girl like you. I don't know what you've said or done to make him see you as a girl decent enough for him, but I'm going to make him see that you're far from that.
Kenneth's mother, who was present, was just as confused as me. The woman adored me and even said how great I am to be managing the hotel, as she knew it.
You must be hardworking to be in your position. Do not listen to whatever N's father has said to you. I love you, and I support you both.
After that meeting, I wasn't sure what I should do. However, Kenneth assured me that everything would be fine.
He's going to come around. I'll go alone and talk to him. I'll do my best to convince him that you're a good person and that he is overreacting. Although, I'm not even sure what sparked this reaction in him.
As promised, Kenneth did go and speak with him, but it didn't turn out well. According to him, his father chased him out and threatened to disown him if he ever talked about me to him. A week later, I was informed that I had a visitor. When the visitor walked into my office, I was shocked to see that it was Kenneth's father.
I want you to stop seeing my son. You're not the right person for him. Have you heard about Ivy? She's Kenneth's best friend, and they love each other. Stop trying to get between them, or else you'll hear from me.
It was the first time I was hearing that name. That added to my problems. Kenneth had never talked about having a female best friend. The only friend of his I knew was a man. After his father left his office, I called Kenneth and asked to see him. Ken, who's Ivy?
Ivy, we used to be best friends. Who told you about her?
Your father was here today, and he made me aware that you're in love with your best friend who's also in love with you, and that I'm trying to get between you both. Kenneth was furious. He couldn't believe his father would come all the way to the hotel to tell such a lie. According to him, Ivy and him used to be best friends until college, when they unfortunately had to separate because Ivy had to relocate to another continent. He let me know that his father had always wanted them to end up together because Ivy was intelligent and was from a rich family and still believes that they someday will. It was a rather silly reason, but at least I now had a better understanding of why Kenneth's father hated me. It really wouldn't matter what kind of job I had. He would have found a reason to hate me regardless. So I concluded that I wouldn't listen to anything that his father would try to say to me. It was tough, though, as he never stopped trying to pressure me to leave his son. But I didn't. Our relationship went on until we got engaged.
Just because the two of you are engaged doesn't mean he loves you. He's still going to leave you for Ivy. She'll come back and they'll fall in love with each other again. And he'll dump you then. Mark my words.
I was a bit worried again. What if Ivy does come back? Kenneth didn't talk about them being in love, but they were best friends. I needed to find Ivy and find out if there was anything actually between her and Kenneth that I would need to worry about. The next day, I got a call from Kenneth's father, which threw me for a loop.
Hello, dear. I have some good news to share with you. I need you at my house as soon as possible.
What is it now? I'm at work. Can this possibly wait?
This is incredibly important. Please just come over as soon as you can.
It was true that I was extremely busy, but I managed to find someone to help me for 2 hours while I rushed over to Kenneth's parents' house. I met a beautiful lady in the living room with his father.
Oh, Clara, you're here. Please come with me to my room. Ivy, excuse us for a few minutes, please. That's Ivy.
What's the good news, sir?
My son's true love. She's back, and it's your turn to leave. I told you you'll lose.
He mocked me so much that I burst into tears as I ran out of the room. Ivy followed me as she saw me leave in tears.
Is everything okay? Why are you suddenly crying?
I was told that you're Kenneth's true love. His father wants you both to be together. Look, Ivy, I'm Kenneth's fiancé. I love him so much. Can you return to where you came from and let me be happy with him? Ivy was surprised. According to her, she had no feelings for Kenneth. They both never felt anything more than the normal friendship between them. She couldn't believe that Kenneth's father was being so cruel to me. She offered to speak to him and clarify things. I thanked her and left after we exchanged contacts.
2 days later, Ivy called me. He refuses to believe that there was never anything between Ken and I. Tomorrow, come with Ken and let's all try to convince him.
I agreed. Kenneth felt bad for his father's behavior when I told him about everything. He agreed to go with us and vowed to cut ties with his father if he was still persistent on disapproving of our relationship. At the meeting, Ivy and Kenneth managed to convince him of the truth, and he finally believed it. I was excited, thinking he would finally accept me as a partner for Kenneth.
I can't believe that you two allowed this evil woman to deny the two of you the obvious love that you have for one another. That's it. I'll teach her not to meddle in your affairs.
I couldn't believe it. Even with Ivy telling him that he had misinterpreted their relationship, he still insisted that he was right and that they were destined for one another. He suddenly turned towards me and ran at me with his hands out. It looked like he was trying to run toward me so he could choke me, but Kenneth stepped in between us and slapped him as hard as he could. His father, slightly dazed, walked away angry and muttering to himself. The next day, I asked Kenneth if everything between him and his father was okay, and he promised me that although his father was fuming, that the two of them were still speaking, and that his father had even told him about a great opportunity for the two of them to make a lot of money through an investment. His father had discovered an investment platform that wasn't very widely known and was planning on investing his entire retirement portfolio on it. As I listened, something about the name of the platform was making me feel uneasy. I had worked for a financial investing firm prior to working at the hotel, and while I wasn't very well suited for the job, I did learn quite a few things. Namely, that the company that Kenneth's father was intending to invest in was nothing more than a scam. Once my memory clicked, and I remembered all about how vile the company was. I warned Kenneth not to invest any of his money into the company as he wouldn't see any of it ever again. He promised me that he would tell his father as soon as he could.
Hey, Dad, I really need you to listen to me. Clara used to work for a financial firm, and she has heard about the company that you want to invest with. I know that you don't like her, but I really think you should listen to her. It wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe hear her out. If that harlot thinks it's a bad idea, then it must surely be a great one. Forget it. I'll invest everything that I got.
Unfortunately, he was so angry that he invested his entire pension and would not hear anything from anyone to dissuade him from his choice. I tried so hard to make him understand the dangers of what he was about to do, but he refused to listen to me. Sadly, just as I had warned him, the company took his money and ran away with it, leaving Kenneth's father nearly in financial ruin. It was such a tragedy and could easily have been avoided, but he simply would not listen to reason. Once it came out that he had lost his entire pension to a scam, his wife announced that that was the last straw. She had been fed up with his odd behavior. Between the way that he treated me and how he was obsessed with his son marrying Ivy, she had enough and she filed for divorce. It was incredibly difficult on Kenneth, but since his father continued to insist that it was somehow all my fault, that he had lost all of his money, and that I continued to drive a wedge between him and Ivy, he had no choice but to take his mother's side and distance himself from him. I felt so guilty, even though I had tried to do the right thing more than once. Kenneth thanked me for having warned him, as he had been ready to join his father and invest all of our money as well, and that would have left us just as poor as his father. In spite of all that occurred, we still went ahead with our wedding. Kenneth's father, of course, refused to attend, but that was just as well, as Kenneth had refused to invite him. It's been almost 2 years since I married Kenneth, and we have a wonderful life together, and are even expecting our first child soon. His mother will make a wonderful grandmother, but unfortunately we have decided that our child will never know their grandfather. Sadly, Kenneth's father has only gotten worse as time has gone on. It's very sad, but all we can do is make the best of it and ignore him as much as we can. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
Mary's dad stood up with evil in his eyes and veins popping out of his neck. He charged at me full speed and punched me right in the face. I fell to the ground and hit my head on the corner of the table, and I started gushing blood from both my nose and my head. Hi, I'm Jack. It had been almost a year since I first started dating Mary, and things were going amazing. I was starting to get a little bit older and had seen all of my peers get married around me while I remained the single one, and I was tired of it. Mary was much younger than me, but she had made it clear that she was also ready for a serious relationship, and we both had talked about the possibility of getting married one day soon. With this being said, we decided it was time to meet each other's parents. My parents are extremely kind and loving and accepted her with open arms, but almost the exact opposite could be said about her parents. She had told me growing up that her father was extremely strict, but he loved her more than anything. He would always act very nasty towards her boyfriends and seemed like he wanted her to be his little girl forever, which rubbed me the wrong way if I'm being honest. I mean, I understand being close with your daughter, but why would you be so against her growing up and being an adult? It seemed pretty weird to me, but whatever. Despite these harrowing stories, I was excited to go meet my potential wife's parents. When we arrived, I got this really nervous feeling in my stomach, which told me something might go terribly wrong. I ignored this feeling and chalked it up to nerves. When we stepped inside, her dad glared at me with rage in his eyes. It was extremely awkward, because he didn't even introduce himself or anything. He just started glaring at me. My girlfriend Mary broke the awkward silence by introducing me to her parents.
Mom, Dad, this is Jack. He's a teacher and he's amazing.
Oh, well, isn't that wonderful?
Teacher? He's a teacher? So he's basically poor. Teachers make no money at all. How is he going to support you?
This insensitive comment didn't bother me much, but it told me all I needed to know about Mary's father. It was clear he was extremely greedy, and he didn't care about making a positive change in the world, which is why I was becoming a teacher. I decided to move on, and we continued on with our visit. Eventually, I caught her dad glaring at me again, and could tell he was about to grill me with a question.
So, Jack, tell me, what are your intentions with my daughter?
Well, I happen to love your daughter very much, and I even see us potentially tying the knot one day. You raised a wonderfully beautiful woman, and I'm honored to say I get to be with her.
What? You're planning on taking my only daughter away from me? You can't do that. She's mine forever.
It was like he snapped. Mary's dad stood up with evil in his eyes and veins popping out of his neck. He charged at me full speed and punched me right in the face. I fell to the ground and hit my head on the corner of the table, and I started gushing blood from both my nose and my head. As I lay there in a daze, Mary wandered over and barely even seemed to care or even be surprised.
Oh, are you okay? Looks like you took quite a fall. My dad loses his temper sometimes, you understand, don't you?
Are you serious? Just get me the heck out of here. I was seriously injured from being attacked, and I barely was able to walk out of their place on my own. I drove home with Mary in silence because I was furious at how she handled the situation. After I cleaned myself up, I was still feeling extremely dizzy and disoriented, but I decided to confront Mary. What was that back there? You totally flaked on me. You should have had my back. I mean, your dad is crazy.
Well, you have to understand, I'm his little girl. He's just protective, that's all. He was just trying to be a good dad.
A good dad? Are you kidding me? He almost killed me, and I probably have a concussion at the very least. I'm filing a police report for this.
What? Are you that much of a wimp that you can't take a little beating?
At that, I stormed out and away from Macy because she was talking crazy. I checked myself into the hospital to see what was wrong with my head and my nose, since they still throbbed like the beating had just happened. The doctors revealed to me that not only was I concussed, I had minor brain damage and my nose was broken. I was infuriated. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I had to file a police report. I recalled Mary telling me that her dad was some big-time lawyer and that he relied heavily on his public image to get clients. I decided that I would seek my revenge in ruining his practice. First, I went to the police station and filed a report, and brought my medical evidence as proof as well. The police told me my best course of action would be to sue Mary's father for the beating, since there was nobody who would help testify against him. I hired the best lawyer in my town, and we began working together to bring justice to that evil man. My lawyer spent a couple of days following Mary's father around, and he discovered that he had some dark secrets of his own. It turns out that Mary's father's bad temper wasn't only towards Mary's love interests, but to Mary's own mother as well. Every night, Mary's father would beat Mary's mother for no reason at all. My lawyer successfully got picture evidence of this abuse, and we stored it safely away. Finally, it was time to come after Mary's father hard. In the courtroom, my lawyer presented the evidence to the judge, and we ended up winning the case. Mary's father was forced to pay $100,000 to me for my suffering, which more than covered the expenses of the hospital bill. Well, I can see you are a weak little man who had to resort to suing me, huh? Don't get too comfortable. I'm not even close to being done. I got permanent brain damage from your beating, you know that? I'm going to burn you to the ground. I'd like to see you try. The very next day, I began tracking down each and every one of Mary's father's clients, and one by one, I sent the evidence of his abuse to them. They were all disgusted with their lawyer's actions, and they fired him immediately. It was at this point that I heard from Mary for the first time in a couple of days. She showed up to my door and was furious.
Are you kidding me? You sued my dad and made him lose a bunch of clients? I thought we could work past this.
Absolutely not, Mary. You didn't support me when I needed it the most. Me and you are finished. Now get the heck out of my life. But first, I have something I think you might want to see. I showed Mary the picture proof of her father abusing her mother, and she broke down into tears. Her attitude suddenly completely changed about her dad, and even apologized and asked to get back together, to which I politely declined. I believe she showed her true colors that day, and I didn't want anything to do with her. Even now that Mary was gone for good, I still didn't feel completely satisfied. I decided that the only thing left for me to do would be to release the proof of his abuse to the internet and let them deal with it. I posted the picture evidence along with my entire story, and it went completely viral. It got almost 1 million hits in only one day, and people were furious. One of the furious people happened to work for the state and saw to it that Mary's father would be disbarred, meaning he would never be allowed to work as a lawyer ever again. Afterwards, angry internet trolls leaked his address, and people began vandalizing his house, which he could not repair because he had no money from being sued, and was not making any new money because he no longer had a job. Because his house was pretty much destroyed, he was forced to move to a tiny apartment with a bug infestation and barely had enough money to feed himself and Mary's mother. But finally, it was at this point when Mary's mother gathered up the courage to leave her abusive husband, and she left to start a new life and meet new people who would treat her right. As Mary's father began to starve, he tried to steal from a local grocery store, where he was caught and brought to jail. When the judge saw he was an abusive man, he decided not to give him a second chance and sentenced him to 2 years in prison for shoplifting. I've heard that Mary no longer speaks to her father at all, but now has an amazing relationship with her mother as they heal from their abusive father. I can't say I feel too bad for Mary's father, since I have no remorse for a scumbag who hits women. But what do you think? Do you think I went too far?